Hey, StockPulse family, welcome back. Today, I've got Joe Brown back to me. Welcome, Joe.
Hey, thanks for having me on again.
Joe, one of the things I'm most excited about, especially as we're leading up to the Silver Symposium, is exactly what we've been expecting to unfold has been unfolding. Here we are, August, BRICS is meeting. We see that they're having discussions about who's going to be coming in and what's going to be happening abroad. Now, tons of discussions about what's happening abroad, but you have a little different perspective that you've been hitting on. And for you guys, if you guys are loving this stuff, please, of course, like, share, subscribe, help us grow the channel. It really helps. And if we're going to love this conversation, please show up at the StockPulse Silver Symposium. It's going to be September 29th through October 1st. And we're just going to be there. Joe Brown will be there. Economic Ninja will be there. Andy Schechtman will be there. Many of our favorite friends that we get to know and love and hang out with are going to be there. So come and have a drink with us. And again, Joe, I'm just going to get right into it because as we focus about what's happening abroad, you've got a different perspective saying, here's one of the things that I think is the biggest existential crisis that we're avoiding here for a little bit of time, but they can't mask it much longer. What is the threat that you're saying, guys, open up your eyes?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. Okay, so to make an analogy that I think today most people understand, you take a look back at the financial crisis. There's movies been made about it, books been written about it. The housing market, there were a few people who looked at the fundamentals and they said, basically, we are positive that all of these mortgages cannot get paid. When you look at the data, you can see that people have 1, 2, 3 mortgages. Most or all of those are adjustable rate mortgages. These are all adjusting to levels that most Americans won't be able to afford in the next year, 2 years. That's going to cause them to be forced out to sell. All the selling pressure pushing prices down, and we're going to have a big crash. Well, you take that and you look at what the government is involved in today, all the fundamentals, and it's the exact same situation. When you take a look at the debt the government owes, the income they're able to take in taxes, and the rates that are skyrocketing for them, and how none of those three things can slow down but are only going to get worse, you realize mathematically they're insolvent and they will default, either outright default or technical default through inflation, one way or the other. There is no other alternative.
When I look at that and I consider my own family, you start to think about what can I do knowing that this is coming down the line? What are the things that you and your family are doing to prepare for a situation like this? And maybe even not you and your family, but what about your friends? What are you telling your friends right now who are just, if they're anything like my friends, you guys don't watch my shows. You're not listening to us. Like we're literally telling you, and my buddy says you can't be a prophet in your own land. And I hear that, but what are you telling your friends to do right now? How are you encouraging them, not financial advice, but what are you encouraging them to learn more about to help them become more prepared and not scared?
Yeah. So I think that's the first piece of the puzzle is that you have to study and learn how this same thing has unfolded many times throughout history in many different places. This is nothing new, although it is unique to the United States right now because the United States has not faced a sovereign debt crisis like it's facing right now. Many other nations have. Many other nations that were the global reserve currency have as well. And so this isn't something that is completely unique in world history. And there are many people who have written extensively about these same things happening throughout history. A great book, When Money Dies by Adam Ferguson. Another one, Big Debt Crises by Ray Dalio. I would start with those. I would tell people to probably start with those two. And you start to see then kind of patterns and you recognize, the whole like this time is different thing. It's like, well, yes, the United States has faced, it has faced financial crises in the past, but the unique set of circumstances that are all coming together right now are either there's more of them or they're greater than they have been in the past. Like our debt to GDP ratio, the fact that we have two half of the national debt is maturing within the next 2 years. That's $16 trillion. Most of that was borrowed at 0 to 2% interest rates. That means within the next 2 years, the government is going to be paying off that cheap debt by borrowing new debt, and that's going to make their interest rate go from 0% or 1% or 2% up to 5 or 6% on that debt. And that's assuming interest rates stay where they are right now and don't go higher from the increased borrowing, from their increased spending and decreasing tax revenues. And so the first thing is learn, and then you get to see how these things play out. Okay, well, what happens to the stock market? Well, if the government decides to print over the problems, well, then that causes inflation. But ultimately, there's a flight of capital and a flight of wealth into inflation protected assets. And even things like stocks, while they may not increase in raw purchasing power, they certainly do better than the currency. So in this case, savers are losers. And then you have to watch though, because they're not printing yet. Right now, we're still heading down the cliff. We're not riding that that rocket ship of inflation up yet because they're not printing right now. So you don't want to be betting right now on things happening that require the money printer to be on to turn out. So right now we do have a little bit of a deflationary cliff in front of us, and I think it'll turn inflationary. So you've got to study history and look at these things and understand that when that printer then turns on, that's kind of like a tide that lifts all boats in terms of price. And ultimately, when you're looking at purchasing power, if you want to make sure that your wealth increases, you have to be in assets that historically increase in purchasing power during those times. Things like land, things like gold, the things that people need, things like food, agriculture, water, the things that people will always continue to buy and need no matter what because of survival. And people stop buying the luxuries and the nice to haves or the want to haves.
This is the kind of the stuff that really gets into my head because as a father, I think about you too and like how you handle these situations. And I think about what one of your YouTube or your Twitter followers said, X followers, they credited you with being the father of the definition of inflation and deflation. They basically accused you of defining and making up what is inflation and making up random metrics to fit your narrative. So as the person who actually created the definition for inflation and deflation, I want to ask you questions that may sound really dumb. Because I don't know anything about deflation or what that word means. But could you help break down for our listeners? This is a very complicated question. What is the difference between deflation and disinflation? Because you're the guy who designed the definitions of it, so might as well just ask you.
Yeah, good question. So number one, definitions change over time, right? So if you open up a dictionary from 100 years ago, that's not relevant today if the dictionary definitions are different. For instance, today, a computer means this. This is a computer. Go back 100 years ago, a computer was a person that did math calculations by hand, right? So definitions change. The definition of inflation has changed. Today, the word inflation means the rate at which prices are increasing. So imagine a car. If a car is sitting still, that's the analogy of prices not moving. Your cost of living stays the same. The prices aren't going up, prices aren't going down, they're staying the same. Your car is not moving. Now you hit the gas pedal. That gas pedal makes the car move forward and you start to move forward. Your distance is changing. Let's say you're going 10 miles per hour. Then that would be the same thing as an inflation rate of, let's say, 1%. Prices are increasing by 1%. You're moving forward. Now, let's say we go back to, like a year ago when inflation was a lot higher. Let's say inflation was 9 or 10%. That means prices are going up by 9 or 10%. From now compared to the last time we measured them a year ago. Now, so that's inflation. It's the rate at which prices are increasing. When we say inflation is decreasing, we're not saying prices are decreasing. We're saying inflation is decreasing. So that would be like slowly pressing on the brakes. So you're going 60 miles an hour on the freeway, you tap the brakes, and you go from 60 to 50 to 40 to 30, you're slowing down. You're still moving forward, but you're moving forward at a slower and slower pace. So that's like prices. They're still going up, but instead of going up at 10% every year, now they're going up by 5% every year. Now they're going up by 2% every year. So during that dynamic, when the rate of inflation is going down, prices are still going up at a slower pace. That's called disinflation. Now, what that trend shows, though, because this is a trend over time, eventually with a car, you keep holding down the brake. What happens? Eventually, you come to a stop, right? And so with prices, you keep on having disinflation. Eventually, the prices stop going up. And actually, what happens is that trend continues, and now prices start to fall. This is a classic boom bust cycle. The money printer turns on, credit gets easy, prices boom. As soon as there's some catalyst where they say, okay, we're either going to have hyperinflation or we need to start tightening things up, then that reverses the boom. Things slow down. Everything starts to collapse, and eventually you do get deflation, and you do get a correction of everything, all the malinvestment getting wiped out. You do have prices that go down as long as you keep your foot on the brake.
And would you define that as disdeflation, since you're up to making definitions? Is disdeflation a word? Because I feel like we can at least come up with random things anyways, because what I hear you saying is we have a sovereign debt crisis and we've got inflation problems, and it's definitely not deflationary yet. So what are we seeing here coming up in the next few months? Like, is that even something that we should be considered about? Disdeflation? Is that a Joe Brown approved word?
No, I think we're going to actually have deflation. So like right now, we did have inflation for the last year or so. We've had disinflation. That trend continues. You go from inflation of 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We're currently at 3. We're going to see 2, 1, 0. We're going to see negative inflation numbers, which is the same thing as deflation numbers. So on average, prices are going to be falling measured by the CPI. And so that's just deflation. That's like you put the car in reverse and now you're losing ground.
For us and you guys who are enjoying this conversation, please come to the Silver Symposium, because Joe Brown's not just going to be talking about this, but also the future of money, along with people like Ninja. And as we talk about this conversation here about prices getting cheaper, I would like to, remind everyone that as you're getting ready to go through this storm, to watch out, because those same cars may be getting cheaper. That same thing that you need today may be getting cheaper, and all of our homes may be getting cheaper. Or may they not? I guess I don't know. These are the conversations that I'm looking to having, because I know even you and Economic Ninja may have a little different perspective on the same topic. Is one person right? Is one person wrong? I'm not really sure that anyone knows, but I know for sure these are the conversations that we look towards to having, because what we can't do is pretend that these conversations don't need to happen. And I think the best thing that we can agree on is if we look for the truth and what's really happening around us, we can agree that the narrative that we're being told by the media doesn't quite feel right. We've got presidents being arrested. We've got Hawaii burning. We've got things. I'm not even going to talk about the list of stuff going on around us that seem to be trying to distract us from everything that's going on. Even as bizarre as the words UFO right now, I'm going like, really? I can't even start to think about UFOs, because what I really see happening in my world is you see places like India not exporting grain. That's a problem that I think is more important than an enemy that I can't see. I believe in God and Glocks. So what I would do if an alien came, would pray and in Jesus' name just shoot it dead. And if none of those work, I don't think there's anything I could have done anyways to prepare for it. But what I do know is if my family is hungry, there's something I could have done about that. And I just want to encourage you guys to follow Joe, think like Joe too, because the idea is when you start thinking bigger than yourself, when you start thinking about how to make more so you can give more, these are the things that really empower you as an individual to create community in a way that's bigger than just you as one person. And I would encourage you guys, share, subscribe, get on Joe's channel, follow him, because Heresy Financial has been a huge win for me, especially when you pair people like Joe up with, someone like Jack from Nobody Special, bringing in the conversation of China and what's happening, and Andy rounding it out with Brazil and what's happening in Argentina and the BRICS nations going on there. These are the conversations I want to have. So I guess for me, leading up to the symposium, as you've been preparing to have a conversation on the future of sound money, give me a teaser of what you may be discussing.
Yeah. So with the long view of history in mind, we can see the same thing play out over and over again. And it's very easy to understand the cycle when you break it down with a like a fake little economy, let's say 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, that used sound money, that used gold for their money. And so we'll talk about how that type of economy works, what happens, what kind of phase change happens when you shift over to fractional reserve banking, and why the evolution is always kind of scaling up to more intervention, more central planning, and how ultimately the end is fragility imposed on the system that causes it to collapse, and that we can actually escape that and remove ourselves from it, have one foot in that world to profit off of it, and then have one foot in the kind of the sound money world in order to have a lifeboat for us so that we don't have to go down with the ship.
For any of you guys who are watching and think he's advocating for CBDCs, I guarantee you that is not what he is saying here. So if you want to show up and hear more about what Joe's saying, Joe, bro, I really appreciate you. I thank you for coming on, and please say hi to your wife. I think she's one of the luckiest people alive to get to talk to you every day. I think she's lucky. So bye, Mrs. Brown. And I look forward to meeting her there at the StockPulse Silver Symposium as well. You guys just have a wonderful day and keep your heads down. Make sure that you're being vigilant and aware. Don't forget, again, Joe Brown, one of my favorites. You guys got to like, share, subscribe, follow him on X, right? We're not tweeting anymore. We're just Xing. And we'll just talk to you guys soon. Keep stacking.